just have a look at how we create and manipulate objects within Maya. So I'm going to start by creating a cube, which is polycube 1. There you go. If I hit F, it frames it in the interface, and so we can see how it's made. Right, if I select off, you can see it's a cube. If I want to see the mesh while I'm working, I can go shading and I can add wireframe on shaded, and so we can see the lines there, which can be handy. The objects are by default created at the origin, which is the 0, 0 point in the world. So if I come out of that, you can see that it's there, which means that half of it is below the ground level. If I select it, go select and move, I can manipulate it with that control there, and then bring it up to the ground level. And in fact, if I go, oh look, in the Y, because Y is up, I can go 0.5, because it's 1 unit by 1 unit. How it's consisted, what it consists of, is here. So width, height, subdivision, widths. Right, so each object, I'm going to hit the space bar, come into the perspective view, hit F to frame the object. Right, if I right click on the object, I get this marking menu up that kind of goes, do I want to see it as an object mode? Do I want to be able to select the edges, the vertices and the faces? So an object is made of vertices, that is a vertex, and I can manipulate that vertex. So I can select move, I can rotate it, although it's a dot, so it won't make much difference. Control Z will put it back where it was before. I can right click, I can select edge, I can select an edge, and I can manipulate an edge. Hit Z, bring it back. I can right click and hit face, and I can select a face and manipulate a face. Hey, so there we go. Right, so object mode. It's very easy to make or create very angular polygonal objects in digital software because you define a point, you join a point up. Curves are more difficult, and most objects, most natural things are curved, and so we're looking to have a soft surface. If I press 3 on the keyboard, now that is a smoothed surface. So really most things, when you want to render them at the end, want to be smooth. If I press 1, you get the original frame. If I press 2, you can see the polygonal wireframe, the control cage, and then you can see the predicted surface there. So 1 and 3 in Maya predicts 2 iterations of smoothing. If we want to control that, we can add edges in to make it behave more as we want. I'm going to use the scalpel tool up here, which is the multi-cut tool. And this is quite useful because normally it will allow you just to cut the surface. If you hold the control key, it will predict a edge cut there. Now if I hit 3, you can see, if I hold and rotate, that we've got this flattened surface. And that's because it's smoothing between the edges. So if I hit 1 again, go back in, hold the control key, I'll put an edge loop here, an edge loop here, an edge loop here, an edge loop here, and an edge loop here, and hit 3. You can see I've now got a cube, but with a quite nice softened edge. And so that's how we would like to render a cube. We don't want to render the initial boxy one because it looks way too digital. And so the difference in appearance, if I select both of those and hit F, it will frame the two of them. And so you can see that object mode, that one is quite subtle and the other one's a bit clunky. So this is what we're really aiming for. Okay, so that's smoothing, and so you would always render objects smoothed, even if they need to be boxy, you would still smooth them. And where those edges are controls how smooth it. If I go edge here, if I double click, I will select the entire loop. If I hit W to move it, if I move that edge very, very close to the surface, and double click here and move that away from the surface or from the edge, and then hit 3, you'll see that that one's quite soft and that one's quite sharp, and that's how you control the sharpness of an edge. Right, okay. When you're making things, you can see that we have these inputs here. These are the nodes, the history nodes. If you go to the attribute editor, they're nodes of information that say this is what you've done to it, and it allows it to think about how you want that to look with all these actions added to it. As you go through the working process, you'll want to clean out these nodes, because otherwise there'll be just way too many things there. And to do that, you come up here and this says delete by type history. If you hit delete by type history, it'll take all those extra nodes out and you'll end up back with just the polycube nodes. You will also find that if you go here, you'll lose the cubeness of it. So if I go on that one, you can see I've still got the polycube information. When you delete the history, it takes this information out of it. And so rather than using a scalpel to cut something up, I can change the amount of subdivisions that I've got there. So if I go 2, you see that I get 2 subdivisions. If I go 3, I get 3 subdivisions. So rather than cutting them individually, you can set something up and kind of go, well, I'm going to need those edge loops, so you can add those in here. And in fact, if I select all of them, I can go 4. I can do that. Right, okay, so now we've got a cube. So I'm going to come back here, delete that. Right, so faces. These are the faces we've got. Going to right click, go face, select this one, this one, this one, and this one. Now we can manipulate things in different ways here. There's all sorts of different pieces, but the things that are most useful here are extrude, which is have something coming out, and bridge, which is kind of join bits together. So if I go extrude, I get this gizmo here, and that gizmo allows me to come forward and bring that out. I can rotate. If I click that, I get the rotate tool. If I click on the arrow, I get the move tool. And if I click on the box, I get a scale tool, and the scale tool will allow me to make it bigger or smaller. And so it's a very useful gizmo. It allows you to do all sorts of different things with it. It's quite a powerful tool. And while the tool's on, you can also put numerical values in here. So if you go, oh, that's too small, I want 0.2, you can actually put a numeric value into that if you want to. Generally, I don't bother. Right, okay, so that's extrude. Let's see what that looks like. If I hit 3, you'll see that we've now got that. If we want to control how sharp that is and what that looks like, I can go 1, I can go back to my scalpel tool, and I can hold the control key, add an edge loop there, add an edge loop there. And then that should, I'm going to go 3, give us a tighter turn of curve. Right, so there you go. So that's an extrude. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use another tool here. I'm going to go select. So select is Q. So select and move W, E and R. These are ones we looked at before. If I go face and I select that, hold the Shift key to select the next face, and the next face, and the next face. Here is circularize, which is really handy. So that turns, if we go 1, that turns that into a circle. If we go to edge, double click on that, I can also turn that into a circle. And so now, when we go 3, I've got a circular end on that, which is kind of handy. So I go from box to circle, which is great. So, I'll make another cube. Bring it over here and put it on the ground. So translate 0.5. There we go. Now, I want this to be a lot softer. So to do that, I'm going to go modify, and no, I'm not. I'm going to go mesh, and I'm going to go smooth. I'm going to open the dialog box and tell it that I want 2 iterations of smoothing. Apply, and it will do that to it. So now I've got these 2 objects. Now those 2 objects are separate objects. You can see they're separate objects here. However, I can make them one object by holding the shift key, selecting the second object, and this is combine. So now, although those 2 objects are still there, because they're still here in the history, it's now polycube 4. If I delete this history, those 2 source cubes disappear, and now we've just got the same object here. And so when your scenes start to get very, very sluggish, it'll generally because it's got all those objects in there, and so you need to delete the history to speed the software back up again. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to face, and select that one, delete it, that one, delete it, that one, delete it, that one, delete it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 edges here. I want 8 edges over here. So I'm going to get that one, delete it. So basically I'm deleting and matching 4 faces over here. And then I'm going to switch to edge. I'm going to double click to get that edge loop. Go and hold the shift key. Double click to get that one. Then I'm going to this key here, and I know I've got 8 edges going to 8 edges, and that is bridge. And that bridges those 2 objects together. So I'm not quite sure why I got a green face there, but never mind. Yep, it says I don't know what my texture is, but anyway. So I get object mode. So there's our strange object. 3, we'll say we've got a sphere at one end, and we've got a cube at the other. And that is how you generate surfaces one way and extrude surfaces. Those 2 actions are the majority of modeling characters. Most of the work that you would do to model a character in Maya are made by those 2 movements. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a plane. I'm going to hit R to scale it, and I'm going to make it huge. Also, I can do it here and go, make it 50. There we go. And then I'm going to add a light. So I'm going to go to rendering. I'm going to add a point light. I'm just going to move it over the scene a little bit, bring it further forward. So now I can go to Arnold and say, render that, please. Now we're not seeing very much because that light is not very bright. So let's just see what we can do with that. I'm going to select the light. I'm going to go to the attribute editor. I'm going to take its intensity and turn it to 50. If I do that, we can now see the object that we've just modelled. Not only that, I can go to the Arnold node and I can change the radius of that point light to 1, and because the light is bigger I get slightly softer shadows, and it's a little bit grainy because we're not looking at it in any kind of complex way. So that would be how many samples we're looking at. So I can add samples, and that should soften those shadows and give us a nicer look. Okay, so that's a modelled object on a plane lit, but it's got this very basic default texture on it called a Lambert, and we're using an Arnold renderer for this, which is quite a modern complex renderer, and it has specific ways of looking at surfaces, and you need to add your own surface to it, or an Arnold surface to make that work. So if you select the object you modelled, right click on it and hold, you come down to assign new material. In the assign new material menu, you go shader, surface, and you add an AA standard surface. I mean, it's a really good shader with loads and loads of potential for adding stuff to it. By default, it's just a white shader, but it has lots of presets which are really handy as well. So if I come over here and go presets, I can go make it. Ooh, what shall we make it? Make it. I'm going to make this one plastic, and that's a blue plastic. And I'm going to go to the ground. I'm going to right click that and go assign new material, shader, standard surface, and then presets. Let's have I don't know, shall we have gold? Gold. Replace. Now that won't show in the viewport, but if we render it, Arnold, render, we've now got a blue plastic toy thing, maybe something from a McDonald's free toy on a gold surface. You get reflections, you get subtle lighting, and it's that easy. So that's our first play. What might be worthwhile looking at is what different objects. So if you go polymodeling, obviously you can try all these different objects, but if you go create polygon primitives, there's loads of different polygon primitives, like helix, and each one of these has their own settings. So you can go with 1 or with 3, and you can go radius 0.1, you know, and you can create really interesting objects here. 3, and you get that. Put a round cap on, and cap subdivisions 3, and then you get these nice little ends to it. Go through the different objects and just have a look at what their settings are, because the platonic solid primitive, if you don't know what they are, go and have a play with them, stick a texture on them, render the scene, and stick some images in your blog and say, look mum, this is what I've made. Okay, so there's your task. Make some interesting images, and I will meet you in the next video tutorial when we start to model a character.